babe. I'm babe. I'm babe. I'm babe.
And it gets your face like warmed up.
Super serious.
Where nothing fun or funny ever happens.
This is a super serious thing.
I don't even like dogs.
Super serious.
I'm an adult. All right, we are back, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Super Serious Dog Podcast. Yes, I promise we're back for good this time. I'm joined by my co-host, Courtney Cuellar, and I'm Misha Pulitsky. And today we're going to talk about a really fun topic, super fun. And that is when we humans tend to talk about bad versus good, especially in terms of behaviors we see in our dogs, when really it's kind of more like, is that necessary or unnecessary? There's not really any behaviors that are bad. Like, okay, you could argue biting is bad, but
not to the dog in that moment.
But not to the dog, right? That's bad to us. And a lot of times we tend to overlay our human perception and our human understanding of how we interact with each other. Like if I went and bit Courtney, of course, like that would be fucking weird. Like we don't do that. We punch each other maybe. I mean,
right.
I don't
but
punch
even
Courtney,
still, I would be like, is that necessary? Like why? Was there a reason for that, Misha? Are you okay? My dear friend who just took violence at me for some reason? Like
you would just assume I have rabies or something. Or it's the beginning of the zombie apocalypse.
I've been spending too long with B-Town.
Right? He's rubbing off on me. I'm start mothering my child like that. I guess biting is probably a good one to start right out the gate, because that's an obvious one, right? Like, yes, we don't want our dogs to bite, but at the same time,
But
we have to understand.
But what you just said is we don't want our dogs to bite.
Right.
That doesn't mean they don't, or they can't, or they won't.
And I hate it when I hear somebody say, my dog would never bite anyone.
Bullshit.
Trust me, your dog will eventually bite. Like now, don't get me wrong. I've met some muffin squishies of a dog that just have been through hell and back and still somehow have never been pushed to bite. But there is a line somewhere that can cross that dog.
I don't make a habit of finding dogs' lines.
Right.
Honestly, I'm not trying to get dogs to bite me.
I mean, and now that being said, there's plenty of people in this world that do want their dog to bite on command, on purpose, for a sport. And they get points and ribbons and medals for how good their dog bites, and then releases that bite and then does other cool shit. And that's awesome. But like, the point is that your dog found it necessary to bite in that situation, whatever it may be, no matter how hard or how soft it was, they felt that they weren't being appropriately listened to. Right. So when you get that feeling of bad dog, no, and the dog's not being a bad dog. The dog's communicating the best way it knows how, because all the other barriers were blown through.
Yep. I mean, applies to puppies, right? Puppy mouthing.
Yep.
The dog thinks it's necessary. That's how the dog is exploring its world. Just like how a toddler picks up everything and puts it in its mouth. Like that's what the dog is doing. So it's necessary to the dog. It is inconvenient to us because we have sensitive skin and their teeth are like little needles and it hurts. So we say it's bad, but it's not bad. It's unnecessary. We can redirect them into a toy. We can give them something appropriate. We can teach them that we don't do that with humans.
Give them a correction once that's an appropriate time for them to have a correction.
We teach them that using their teeth on us is not necessary.
Yep. Or is it appropriate? And I think necessary and appropriateness kind of are really important to kind of understand as well, especially when you're talking about dogs, because like they don't know what's appropriate or inappropriate, right? Like, for example, I use this example all the time. If you go to Japan, it is incredibly common and very, very rude for somebody not to slurp when they're eating, especially if you're eating like noodles and soup and stuff like that. Like if you don't do that, you are rude. But if they come over here and they slurp, we're like, oh, gross. Like, what are you doing? Like, that's super rude. So it's also in terms of what's culturally appropriate, but also biologically appropriate. And we have to teach our dogs that if they want to be our cuddle buddies, if we want them to be our companion and our friend and our jogging buddy and our fetch buddy and whatever,
then
we
it's
have to
not
teach
appropriate.
We have to
for them
teach
to
them
bite.
what's appropriate. Right. Exactly. But at the same
barking
time,
is another really good one.
yes. At the same time, like we also have to, by the way, Courtney is drinking on my behalf and I love her so much for it. She's totally drinking a White Claw right now because I'm usually the one having a beer when we record. So she's drinking for 3 for me and my baby. But yeah, so yeah, barking. So barking is a really good one too. Somebody asked me this the other day, is like, when is it okay that my dog's barking at this? Is that bad? And I'm like, dude, like there's not really a such thing as bad barking. And in fact, like I would argue that even if your dog is threatened and having like a very threatening display while they're barking is good almost, right? Because the dog feels like it's necessary to do that because they are trying to communicate. Like I wish B-Town effing growled before he bit, and he doesn't really do that. Like sometimes he'll give me a little, if I'm like petting him and he's like getting uncomfortable. But a lot of times I have to watch more for like freezing and stiffness and, not push my luck basically and know it's appropriate, because otherwise he will find it necessary to bite me.
Right. And that
barking
is super inconvenient for you.
Right. Barking at the door is a really good one. Like, oh, it's so annoying when my dog does that. I'm like, well, yeah, because you're not, dogs don't invite people over to the front door of their den and have packages delivered to their den and invite strangers who are not part of their immediate pack into their den or anywhere nearby. So when your dog is yelling at somebody because they're walking down the street, they feel it's necessary to tell that dog to fuck off or that person to fuck off because you're walking on my turf, dude. Right?
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it's to them, a lot of things in our human world are unnecessary.
Oh yeah.
Like
totally.
We stare at boxes a lot. And like, how unnecessary do you think dogs find that? Like, you ever see a dog just stare at a box? No,
there's food in it.
Well, that's a whole other thing.
if they're taught to stare at it.
Yeah. So like there has to be give and take, and you have to open up your perspective to see that your dog is not trying to be bad. They are trying to figure out what's appropriate and inappropriate, what's necessary and unnecessary. You can use a lot of words there. But good and bad have a really weird connotation to them, where it's like, like good and evil. Like your dog is not a demon. Your dog
B-Town is.
I mean, he is, sure, he's pretty close to one, but really he's just a scared little shit inside of a tiny little dog body and going way too fast for his own good, right? And all that combination of things make him seem demonic.
Yeah. And honestly, like it's the same thing as like a bad dog. I just want my dog to be a good dog versus a bad dog. And it's like, well, a bad dog is just one that wasn't appropriately shown what the expectations are living in the human world.
Right.
It's not a bad dog. It would be perfectly fine acting the way it acts if it didn't affect us negatively.
Right.
So again, it's back to our perception. And yeah, it's this, the good and evil thing. Like I'm having a good hair day versus a bad hair day.
Right.
So stupid. It's so dumb.
But like, are dogs little shits sometimes? Absolutely. Right. But that doesn't make them evil. That doesn't make them bad. That just makes them manipulative opportunists, and then they also, like to enjoy themselves. And so if you have your front door open and they want to run out and go for a little neighborhood adventure, like that's super inconvenient to you, right? Because your dog is now a bad dog. It ran out the front door and it's running down the street and it's not even listening to you, right? But that dog is bored as fuck and was never taught door boundaries and smelled something or saw something or just was like, the opportunity's there. She's not paying attention. I can tell because she's looking at her phone, you know, and the dog just went for it. And the dog had the time of its life, you know?
That reminds me, my neighbor and friend, she has this big, like, she thought the dog was going to be like 40 pounds and instead he's like 80. He's like a big, like Great Pyrenees mix or something like that. So really, really sweet, really goofy, but very like hard-headed and determined and that kind of thing. And of course, you know, one of the things that he also struggles with because he's a quarantine puppy is like, oh my God, people and things. This is the best thing ever. And so he went on a little runabout through the neighborhood. This was right before the freeze too. And so of course my poor neighbor is like chasing him down the street and like he almost runs towards Burnett, which is a really, really busy high traffic road. Unfortunately, like at the last second, this woman comes out of the daycare that's right at the intersection and he just like beelines for her and is like, hello friend, runs right up to her, gets some pets from her. And she like grabs his collar because Morgan's like, you know, freaking not even wearing shoes probably and just like crying and screaming at her dog, like, please come back to me. But she knows he's not a bad dog. She knows that like, I should have taught him this, but like, you know, there was a lot of limitations when she first got him.
Yeah. With my first dog, Dixie, I was not a dog trainer. And that was something that Dixie liked to do is catch me not paying attention, going through my front door and just fucking book it. And it resulted in lots of screaming, running, crying through my apartment complex, wondering why my dog won't listen to me. I'm yelling at her. Can she not hear me? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Bad dog.
And then when I caught her telling her what a bad dog she was, you know?
Yeah.
And
yeah, she loved that. She was like, oh, is that a good thing? I don't know what that means.
She's wagging her tail the whole time. I can't understand you stupid fucking human.
Oh my God. I love that part where you chased me. That was my favorite
that was
part.
so fun. She loved that game. It was the best. But I was like terrified to lose her. So of course I chased her. Right.
Yeah, get hit by a car or whatever. Like,
like I was terrified. One time she pulled me down. I was attempting to jog with her, which I don't run. I've never been good at running. I don't know. I go through phases where I think I'm going to be good at running. Anyway, so Dixie had never gone running, and I was like, "We're gonna run." And I tried to take off running, and she was like, "Okay," and just fucking pulled me really hard, and I fucking face planted and skinned my knee. But she just took off. And I remember like running up this hill and seeing these people and being like, did y'all see a dog? You know? And they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, did you see a dog? A black dog. She had a leash. She was running. Did you see? You know, I'm like freaking out.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. And they're like, are you sure? Because you're bleeding a lot. And I look down and my knees are just like ripped to pieces and there's blood everywhere. And I'm like, yeah, but the dog, did you see her?
Yeah, I'm not okay. I'm looking for my effing dog, y'all. Help.
Yeah. What a fun time.
Fun. That is so fun. Yeah. Dog found it necessary to do that because it was super fun.
Yeah, the dog had fun. The dog was having a great time. She didn't like, and you want to know where she was? Is she was back where I fell. She just ran a zoomy loop.
Did a loop.
Yeah, and came back and was looking for me. She was looking around. I was at the top of a hill and I could see her, and I was so mad at her because she was being such a bad dog, you know?
Yeah.
Poor
Lee took the dogs for a walk today. Usually we go together, but because I'm recording, he opted to go for us basically. So there's this like, I live in a cul-de-sac. There's this person that lives on the corner. They're not usually out, but every once in a while they are, and they have like a healer or something like that. I don't really know what it is. And they always have it off leash, just like hanging out in the front yard or like loading stuff up in the car, like before they load the dog up to go somewhere. But that dog has like no control, and that person who owns it has zero awareness of their surroundings. And it's really frustrating because like, you know what our dogs look like. You've encountered us and seen us walk past your house 1,000 times. Like, what are you doing? We've lived here for 2 years. And of course, her dog always runs after my boys, like probably friendly, but my dogs are going to yell. And fortunately, they've never been in an altercation or anything like that. And Lee told me that whenever like she saw that, she ran over, grabbed her dog by the scruff, dragged it inside, and they have like a screen door. So when the screen door closed, she proceeds to yell at her dog. And I was like, that's helpful. Why don't you try calling your dog or grabbing them before that happens?
Right.
And then also don't yell at your dog after. The dog doesn't know what the F happened. The dog is off leash and had the liberty to choose what it wanted to do. So you're the person that put your dog in an unnecessary situation and then proceeded to yell at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Get ahead of the problem. And then the problem won't happen.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? You reminded me of this guy the other day at the park. He was walking a German Shepherd, and I had a couple dogs with me, and we were going to like cross paths. And from about 30 feet away, he started telling his dog, don't you be a bad dog. I'll take you home. I'll take you home. Don't be a bad dog. And just like on loop, I'll take you home. Don't be a bad dog. Don't be a bad dog. I'll take you home.
Oh my God.
And I was just like, okay. And the German Shepherd's just like wagging his tail and looking at the dogs. And it was hilarious. It took everything not to just like bust out laughing at this guy. I just tried to get past him with my dogs as quickly as possible so that his dog wouldn't be a bad dog and have to be taken home, because that is how you would talk to like maybe a child if you're an asshole. But like you can't, like, talking to a dog like that does absolutely nothing. Taking your dog on a shorter walk because they were a bad dog is not gonna have the effect that you're hoping for. They're not gonna remember that and be a good dog on the next walk so they can go for a longer walk.
Because all they remember is they went for a walk.
Right. So what you need to do is focus on them being the kind of dog you want them to be on a shorter walk before you attempt to go on a longer walk.
Yep. I say dumb stuff to my dogs all the time, but like I do it in jest, knowing like it's more for the other humans around me within earshot.
Same.
Like my dogs like to go. There's a dog that lives kind of in the corner of our yard, and there's like this little like foot gap basically between all the fences. And Rocky really likes to go say hi to Corner Doggy, and Corner Doggy always like play bows at us and stuff, and it's really cute. Like always very calm. But of course, like B-Town runs over there and starts instigating and like yelling. So Rocky's like, I'm going to yell too. That sounds fun. And so I'm always like telling them, like, is that really necessary, you guys? Like, you can go say hi to your friend, but don't yell at your friend. That's rude. Or like when Dexter, my next door neighbor's dog, is playing fetch, and like Boston and Rocky will go and like bark at the fence and stuff. I'm just like, excuse me, Dexter is a very good boy. Can you please stop yelling at him? It's just, I'll just say dumb shit like that to them all the time.
Yeah. But I say dumb shit to my dogs too, but not when I actually expect them to listen. I say it for my own human amusement and anyone who happens to be in earshot amusement, because it's just dumb shit. I'm just talking to my dogs. But when I actually want them to listen, I'm rarely saying anything. I'm probably using body language, and I'm probably using like maybe a short word, probably snapping my fingers. Like it's much more about the intent and the body language than anything that comes out of your mouth.
Yep.
Fun fact.
Absolutely.
For any kids taking notes out there, write that one down.
Yep. I walked into my client's house a couple days ago, and she's working on like door boundaries and like having her hold a sit while a guest comes in, and then she was going to send her to her bed, but she wanted to work on sit a little bit through the distraction. And I guess she's been watching Victoria Stilwell stuff, and Victoria Stilwell has this like thing where she teaches her clients, thank you. Like, thank you, I got it, kind of thing. Like, you don't need to do all this unnecessary behavior. And my client looks up real quick and is like, is that okay? I'm saying thank you to my dog. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's more about intent. Like you're being very like specific with what you want to come about you saying thank you, and you're holding your dog accountable for it. So like, you could say banana, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
But like, saying thank you is kind of nice and polite. And at the same time, like it kind of has this nice, like, thank you. It's like kind of succinct. You know what I mean? So yeah, I thought that was really funny. She always brings up like, oh, did you see on whatever Victoria Stilwell's show is? I can't remember what it's called. Did you see that? Did you see this? And like, I had a very cool answer where I was like, oh, I'm not a big fan of reality TV shows personally, like it's just not really my thing. It's just really over dramatized. And like, especially when it comes to like dog training stuff, like I'm sure she's great or what, like, cause you don't want to talk shit about other people and other trainers and specifically about things that clearly that client enjoys. And like, there's no harm coming out of the person watching this woman. Like there's no harm. Let's get back on topic though, shall we?
Sure.
Because I thought of another thing about like unnecessary versus necessary, good versus bad behaviors. So destructive behaviors.
Like ripping apart couches and stuff.
And blinds and all
bad
that kind
dog.
of stuff.
Bad dogs. Bad dogs tear up your stuff. If they tear up your stuff, they're obviously a bad dog.
Right. And, like, it's very frustrating. I get that. Like, I've had dogs tear up my stuff and I get it. And, like, I just want to scream and tell that dog they're a bad dog. But, like, there's literally no point because it's not a bad dog. It was bored. It was anxious. It was whatever. Mm-hmm. But also, most people, when I ask them, so did you ever crate train your dog when they were a puppy or before or whatever? And they're like, oh, yeah, but my dog hated it. And I'm like, and you stopped.
So you never taught your dog how to deal with frustration? You never taught your dog to deal with a situation that it maybe didn't love?
Yep.
How's that working out?
You gave in and like, don't get me wrong. There's extreme cases. Like actually my neighbor, her dog Howie is also going through that phase where he'll destroy blinds and stuff, usually because he's like jumping up on the windows, not necessarily because he's like tearing them up, but she left and he like tore down the blinds and like ripped up the bottom parts of the curtains. And, he's just a big dumb pushy boy, and like I feel bad for her, but at the same time, like he just yelled, and he didn't just yell with the crate. He was actually like, he almost broke a tooth on his crate, and like he was bending the bars and like cutting up his mouth and all this kind of stuff. And like they weren't in a position to hire a trainer because everything was locked down,
right?
And like I get it. Like we're not judging anybody by any means. However, people need to understand that this is a direct result of a consequence, or this is a direct consequence of their actions of not preparing their dog better for these types of situations. Because whether Howie was bored or he was frustrated that somebody was gone, or he just thought it was a good idea because maybe he had the superstitious association with every time I tear up something, my owners come back shortly after because you just happen to come back about the time that he's done with his little party, whatever it may be. Right. There's got to be, it's our fault at the end of the day. And the dog found it necessary to do that. They're not a bad dog. Dogs chew sticks all the time, and nobody ever says they're a bad dog for chewing sticks. Right?
I do.
No, you don't. You purposely give dogs leaves and twigs and things to chew on all the time. So.
But what you were saying about your neighbor's dog, like just because you may not know the reason does not mean there was not a reason.
Right.
So there could have been a squirrel outside that window that was taunting that dog. Mm-hmm. Right. And he just couldn't fucking contain himself. It may have had nothing to do with the owners being gone and more to do with what he saw out the window. Or like
trying to figure out how to get out the window to get to the thing he wanted.
Right. So like, especially in situations where you're not there and destruction happens, my advice is always to, next time that situation comes up, limit the amount of destruction they could possibly do.
Sorry, Rocky just barfed up some grass or something.
Oh, no.
Are you okay, buddy?
Got dog barf.
Oh, no, that's not good. And there's like little kibbles in it,
too.
He's
He's throwing up more.
Yeah.
Well, I do think we're almost at the end of the episode. You want to go ahead and just wrap up?
Let's just, it's a little early. Sorry, guys. But
but Rocky's barfing and we're going to need to figure out why. If you want to, we're going to still record a Patreon once we make sure Rocky's okay. Yeah. So if you want to come pop over to Patreon, check it out. We go on and on and on. Tons of shit on there. Yep. Love you guys. Later.
We'll see you next time. Bye.